Well, good morning and welcome to this morning's reflection. I hope that you all had a really blessed Christmas. And I wanted to take this time to thank you for having listened to my reflections over the whole of this year. For those who have been regular listeners to my morning reflections, I just want to say thank you for being there with me every morning. Today, we're going to be looking at the life of a man who did not seek greatness as the world defines it. He did not lead a movement. He did not found a school. He did not even gather disciples around himself. He lived quietly. He wrote intensely. And he suffered deeply. And he died largely misunderstood. Yet his life continues to speak because it was lived with a fierce seriousness before God. The person that we are looking at today is Soren Kirkengaard. And he was born in Copenhagen in 1813. He was born into a household shaped by wealth and by sorrow. His father was deeply religious, and he was haunted by guilt and convinced that God's judgment hung over the family. This atmosphere of piety, mixed with anxiety, formed the soil in which Soren Kirkengaard's thoughts began to grow. And from early on, he learned that faith was not comfortable, not sentimental, and certainly not casual. God was real, God was demanding, and God was terrifyingly close. This early formation planted in him a lifelong question. What does it mean to exist as a single individual before God? Not humanity in general, not society, not the church as an institution. But this person, in this moment, standing alone here with responsibility. He was brilliant, playful, ironic, and deeply lonely. He wrote with wit and imagination, inventing pseudonyms who argued with one another, each exploring different ways of living. These were not literary tricks for their own sake. They were expressions of his conviction that truth cannot simply be handed over. Truth must be appropriated. One must choose it, one must live it, and one must suffer for it. At the heart of his life stands a painful decision. He broke his engagement with a young woman called Regina Olsen, and he loved her deeply. And yet he believed that his vocation, his calling, required solitude and suffering. Whether this decision was faithful or tragic or both, well, that remains debated. What is clear is that he never, ever escaped the cost of it. He carried her with him in memory and longing for the rest of his life. And this choice reveals something central about him. He believed that obedience to God is not always externally admirable, nor emotionally satisfying. Sometimes it looks like loss. Sometimes it looks like misunderstanding, and sometimes it looks like failure. He refused the idea that faith is primarily about being a good citizen or a respectable member of the church. He watched the Danish state church baptize everyone, confirm everyone, bury everyone, and call it Christianity. Against this, he insisted that Christianity is not a cultural inheritance, but is a personal risk. To follow Christ, he believed, is to step into paradox. The eternal enters time. The infinite becomes finite. God becomes human. And the human response is not certainty, but trembling. Faith is not clarity, it is courage. Soren Kirkengaard spoke often of anxiety, not as an illness to be cured, but rather as a sign of freedom. Anxiety arises because we are not determined. We must choose. And every choice opens us to responsibility. Anxiety then is the dizziness of freedom, the moment when we realize that our lives truly matter. Yet he was equally clear that despair is the greater danger. Despair is not simply sadness. It is the refusal to become oneself before God. It is either losing oneself in the crowd or trying to define oneself without reference to God at all. Despair can wear the mask of success, busyness, even religiosity. In his own life, one sees an embodiment of this struggle. He was mocked publicly. A satirical newspaper ridiculed him mercilessly, and he became a figure of laughter on the streets of Copenhagen. And yet he did not retreat. He believed that suffering, when endured honestly, strips away illusion and forces the soul into truth. In the final years of his life, he turned sharply against the institutional church, not because he rejected Christianity, but because he loved it too much to let it become hollow. He accused leaders of making faith easy, respectable, and safe. But for him, a Christianity without the cross was no Christianity at all. In 1855, he collapsed on the street and died shortly thereafter. Refusing communion from a church he believed had betrayed the gospel. He died poor, alone, and convinced that his work would only be understood later, if at all. And yet perhaps this is precisely the point. He did not want followers. He wanted readers who would stop reading and start living. As we reflect on his life, we're not asked to imitate his choices, nor to share in his severity. We are asked something quieter and more unsettling. Who are you becoming? Who are you becoming? Are you hiding in the crowd? Or are you daring to stand before God as a single individual? He reminds us that faith is not about answers that settle us, but questions that awaken us. Not about certainty, but about commitment. Not about comfort, but about truth. To live, he believed, is to risk oneself. And to believe is to risk oneself before God. In this way, his life becomes not a doctrine to be mastered, but a mirror held up to our own existence, inviting us to choose, to trust, and to become. And so I leave you with the question, who are you becoming?